Hello everyone. Our discussion today, our WITIP today, is going to be on something called the Schleiffen Plan. You need one blank piece of paper. All right, here we go. The Schleiffen Plan, ladies and gentlemen, has to do with World War I, which I just recorded a video for you about recently. So Germany is going to have a problem. Germany is going to be surrounded by enemies. It's going to be have enemies on both sides. So they are going to be dealing with what is called a two-front war. Of course, you understand the concept of the front lines. So basically, Germany has two fronts. Now, why would this be a problem? Or why is this happening? This is because Germany is in between. Remember the alliance system that I talked about? The Germans are trapped between members of the Triple Alliance. The Triple Entente. They have France to their west and Russia to their east. Okay, so this is going to make this very difficult. The Schleiffen Plan was a German war plan, as I stated up here, the top bullet. It was designed by a man named Alfred von Schleiffen, and you can see there's that VON. Remember, I like to talk to you about VON, meaning somebody who was of Royal Prussian nobility. That's what Schleiffen was. And I should probably mention to you that Schleiffen has passed away by the time World War I starts. He's no longer alive. But the Germans are going to use his plan to try to win a two-front war. So what is the concept behind this? What is the idea behind how are we going to do this? Okay, number one. It's two ideas. Number one is that the Germans are going to attack France first. And they're going to do a quick strike through Belgium, the country of Belgium. Now, in my discussion of World War I, I didn't bring up Belgium. Belgium was a neutral country. Belgium wasn't even involved in either one of the alliances. So the Germans, you can see here, it was like I kind of commented, the Germans could have stayed out of it. They want to get in. The Germans want to get in so bad, they're willing to violate the neutrality of a neutral. The neutrality of a non-allied country, and namely Belgium. And once they get through Belgium, and then they're going to attack into northern France. And the idea is that the Germans believe they could take Paris within a quick 2-month time period. All right? In other words, what I'm trying to say here is they're going to take the entire German army and go through Belgium and do this all within 2 months. Okay? Now, why could they do that? Well, Schleiffen believed that the Russians, look, Russia is this humongous country, all right? Russia is huge. They got armies all over their huge expanse. So Schleiffen believed it was going to be very difficult for the Russians to organize and mobilize. It would take longer. Schleiffen believed it would take the Russians longer than 2 months to get themselves organized. So what do? You use all of your troops, all the German troops are going to be used against France first. And once that 2-month campaign is over and Paris has been toppled and Paris has been taken, then what can you do? Then you can use your entire German army to the west, and you'll have plenty of time to get it done. And then you can move the entire German army back to the east and move against the Russians. Okay, that's the idea behind it, and that's really the gist of it. There's obviously lots of things that are important about this. This is obviously a very offensive style type thing, and you can see that the key to this whole thing is going to be speed. They got to develop. They've got to do this thing quickly. The whole thing is going to be dependent on how fast can the Germans do this. One of the things that's going to be very important here, a product of the Industrial Revolution, and it's not weapons this time, it's transportation. How do you get all of your German troops? How do you get them all from France? How do you get them all from France to Russia? They've got to ride the rails. Okay, they're going to ride on railroad cars. And by this time, look, if you want to guess, look, the British were the first first nation to industrialize. In Europe, really, it's the Germans that were the second. The Germans were right behind the British as far as industrialization was concerned. This was not going to be an issue. This is something that even in Schleiffen's lifetime, he saw the rise of the railroads. The Germans also believed that their soldiers were going to be superior. Whoops, I want to cover that up. Don't want to give that away right away. They believed that the German soldier was a superior soldier. We're going to, you maybe recall me talking about social Darwinism. There should be a wit up about Charles Darwin. Okay, so the Germans are going to rely on the superiority of the German soldier, which they believe is really the key to this whole thing. The German soldier is superior to the French soldier. The German soldier is superior to the Russian soldier. Okay, all right. So draw that little line right there, and then let me make a couple more points here. Obviously, I think you saw that just a second ago. This plan is not going to work. It's going to fail, and there are a couple of reasons. First of all, the Belgians were pretty scrappy. The Belgian army was much tougher than expected. It was kind of gnarly and bloody, and there were some bad things that happened. The Germans were not. They were willing to play by some unfair things and do some things that were pretty gross and bloody and terrible, frankly. Some atrocities were committed against the Belgians. Okay, The Russians were quicker than expected. The Russians moved faster than was expected. And lastly, a German general makes a mistake. A German general actually pauses in northern France. Okay? And that was not what they wanted them to be doing. All righty? Okay, so what does this all mean? Well, this all means that defense is going to dominate. Okay, defense is going to dominate World War I. This is an offensive plan, and it doesn't work. And so what we're going to see is that everybody started digging trenches. So the Germans get to a certain place, and they say, we're not giving up what we got so far, let's dig in. And the French come out to meet the Germans, and they say, we can't let these Germans go any further, so we're going to dig in. And what you have on, really, across northern France is hundreds of miles of trenches facing each other. Okay? And so how did this work? Well, soldiers were ordered to go over the top. Okay? So this is a term you should remember, over the top. What does this mean? Well, this meant that it was, and it's kind of insane when I tell you this, but they would charge at each other. So you're safe inside a trench for the most part, and then their generals would order them to charge. They'd literally blow a whistle. I'm not kidding when I say that. And what this meant was, so soldiers went over the top. And what this meant was, you climbed out of your trench and you charged the enemy over open space. Now this may sound crazy to you, and frankly I agree with you. It is crazy. Okay? This was the area between the two trenches, the open space between the two trenches, which was full of blast holes and craters and barbed wire and trickiness in and of itself, was called no man's land. And look, you didn't want to be stuck in no man's land, because obviously that was extremely unsafe. The person in the trench is protected by the trench. The person in no man's land is not protected by anything. Okay? And basically soldiers would fire at each other from the protected trenches. Okay? What is the importance of the Schleiffen Plan? Well, I guess I would say that Schleiffen himself was a product of another era. He was a product of really sort of a pre-industrialized sort of idea, time period. So Schleiffen did not take into account a lot of these things. Yes, he thought railroads were going to be important, okay, but these techniques that are used in this are not going to be up to date. How's that sound? This is not up to date at all. And so military thinking is not up to date. Not up to date with what? It's not up to date with new weapons technology. The technology is better. All right. What are these guys charging at each other for? They're charging at each other, if you really think about it, we're trying to take over the other side's trench. Well, what are you going to do when you get there? The idea was you fight hand-to-hand combat. Okay, we're going to get in the trench and we're going to fight with our swords and bayonets, and that's all well and good. But the problem is that rarely did the soldier make it to the other trench because he was exposed in no man's land to open fire. So hand-to-hand combat doesn't work, but the strategists, the planners, the generals, for 4 years, they really don't figure this out. And they keep attacking and attacking and attacking each other across this open space. And so what we call this is a static war. Now, those of you who work out, you know that static stretching is you stretch and hold. Okay? So static front lines are front lines that just hold. They stay the same. All right? And so there you go. Static is your other term. The front lines rarely moved for the entire 4 years of the war, especially over there in France. Now, and this became known as the Western Front. So it was the Germans' Western Front. So even the British and the French and the Americans called it the Western Front, even though they were facing east. And basically, these trench lines did not change much at all. Okay? And so who wins a war like this? How can it finally end? Well, the side that's going to win is going to be the side with the most troops. And you can see that this whole thing is going to be an absolute bloody mess. An absolute bloody mess. And both sides, the Russians do it, the British and the French do it, the Germans certainly, they just pour men into these trenches. And these trenches are just, basically waiting rooms for these guys to go and die. And it's a dang shame, and it's really a shame that the leadership of both sides, frankly, failed so miserably. Okay, draw that little line right there, and let me make one last point. The Schleiffen Plan, everybody, eventually succeeds. Well, you may say, what the heck are you talking about, Mr. Bryan? You just said it was a failure. Yes, I did. When did it succeed? Well, I bet you could guess when it succeeds. It doesn't succeed in World War I. It succeeds in World War II. And who does it? It's actually Hitler, who, of course, was a great student of history himself. He's the one who makes it work. He's the one who is able to make it happen. And it's not till 1940 that it works. Of course, we talked about that when we talked about Hitler, about how the Germans conquered France. Okay? And that really, he did the same thing. They went right through Belgium and into northern France and took Paris. And frankly, it was pretty quick. Probably it was about 2 months. So the Schleiffen Plan does work. Alrighty? Okay. There you go. Very good. That piece of paper goes into your front section. Thank you very much. I will see you again. All right? And just remember, even though I'm not here, I'm still here.